Hello wild ones, in this episode we're going to be taking a field trip down to the Barton Springs Spillway here in Zilker Park, where we're going to be on the lookout for some of our fish friends. So, while we're down at the creek, we might not be able to see a sheep's head, but we might be able to see a bluegill, other sunfish, and maybe some mosquito fish. We'll also probably run into a couple of turtles, and if we're lucky, maybe we'll see a snake. But before we head out, there are a few things I'm going to make sure I pack before we go. One thing being my mask, sunblock, proper footwear, and a net. One more thing to keep in mind, wild ones. Remember, when we're out in our green spaces, it's kind of like we're in the wildlife's home, so we want to respect their home. So we always want to make sure to observe wildlife from afar and not to impede in their area. Right now I'm at the top of the entrance to the Barton Springs Creek, or Barton Springs as some may know it as. Today we're going to be going down and looking for some of the fish friends we talked about. We're also going to be looking for macroinvertebrates, or fish food. So macroinvertebrates are clams, snails, crawdads, or crawfish, and those are some of the things that our fish friends like to eat and munch on. Okay, wild ones, so right now we are looking at a Texas cooter, which is one of our native turtle species. So right now, as you can see, it's hanging out on this log. Now, all turtles are cold-blooded, so that means they rely on the sun to warm their bodies up. So every morning, right around now, or when the sun's really high up and there's nobody out in the parks, you'll often see a lot of our turtle friends doing exactly this. They're not always hanging out on trees. Sometimes you'll see them hanging out on rocks or on land sometimes. As a park ranger, we really discourage folks feeding the wildlife because it makes them really friendly towards people, and oftentimes that can lead and put them in very dangerous situations. Not all folks are as comfortable with wildlife as others, and so we like to keep that in mind. So for our safety and for the wildlife safety, we like to discourage feeding. Now, you can come down to Luna Point and you can observe the turtles all you want. They'll come right up to you, you can get some really cool photos, and you get to look really close at them, but let's still keep a safe distance and no feeding of the wildlife. Now, I'm down at the water and I have everything I'm going to need to look for macroinvertebrates. So, with looking for macroinvertebrates, you're going to need a net, a magnifying glass if you want to take a closer look, and lastly, you're going to need a bucket. Okay, wild ones, first things first, we're going to need to put some water in our bucket. So we're just going to take a little bit of the creek water there, and we have it in our bucket. Can't quite see it. Now, I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to take my net, and I'm just going to drift it through the water a couple of times. And whatever I catch, I'm going to empty out into my bucket. So, I'm going to see if I can find some cool things, and I'll be right back. wild ones, now that we have our bucket with our water, I went ahead and added in my sediment, or the things that I found. So once you have it in the bucket, you kind of want to let it rest for a few minutes to let all the silt or the dirt settle at the bottom, and that way you can get a really good look at what is in your bucket. So on my search, I found something super duper cool. So the first thing I found was this bit of a crawdad or a crawfish. Something really cool that it shows me is that our fish friends are eating the crawdads that they find here in the creek. So this is a great find. Let's see. Ooh, look at this. I also found this really cool bit of a clam. So it also shows that the fish in the creek like to eat clams. Found a rock. I also found this algae. Ugh, looks so gross. But this stuff is actually super important because it provides habitat for our fish friends. Okay, wild ones, now it's time to return our samples back to the water. So, easiest way is to just take your sample bucket and just gently put it down into the creek. And ta-da! All our samples are back where they belong. Remember, we're only observing. We're not taking anything home with us because the things in the creek are very important for the ecosystem and our fish friends to survive. Whoa, it's been so fun hanging out with y'all today. I hope you had just as much fun as I did, and I hope you learned something really interesting. Make sure to tag us in any photos of you out in our green spaces looking for our fish friends. Bye, and remember, stay wild, y'all.